The sound of the crystal flute shattering against the marble floor echoed like a gunshot. In the VIP section of New York's most exclusive club. The music stopped instantly. 50 people held their breath. Everyone knew the rule. You do not disrespect Dante Moretti, and you certainly don't breathe wrong in front of his fiancée, Vanessa. She had just slapped a waitress for pouring the wrong vintage. Most people expected the waitress to beg for her life, but she didn't. She stood up, wiped the wine from her cheek, and said 6 words that would destroy the Mafia queen's reputation forever. This is the story of the quiet girl who didn't just challenge the mob. She brought them to their knee. The air inside the Obsidian Manhattan's most impossible-to-book supper club always smelled the same expensive leather, truffle oil, and fear. Elara Vance adjusted the cuffs of her uniform, a stark, crisp white button-down tucked into black slacks. She hated the uniform. It made her feel like a ghost, which in a place like this was exactly the point. The clientele here didn't pay $3,000 for a bottle of Petrus to make conversation with the help. They paid for invisibility. They paid to have their secrets poured into crystal glasses and then forgotten the moment they walked out the heavy oak doors onto Fifth Avenue. Elara was good at being invisible. At 24, she had mastered the art of blending into the background. She kept her head down, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes focused on the tables. She needed this job. The tips from a single Friday night shift could cover her rent in Queens for a month, and with her mother's medical bills from Mount Sinai Hospital piling up, Elara swallowed her pride every single night. "Table 1 is arriving," the floor manager Gilles hissed into his earpiece, his face draining of color. "Everyone look alive. Moretti is in the building." The atmosphere as the kitchen shifted instantly. Chefs stopped shouting. Bussers straightened their aprons. Even the air conditioning seemed to drop a few degrees. Dante Moretti, the capo dei capi of the East Coast. At 32, he wasn't just a mob boss. He was a corporate entity. He owned shipping lines, tech startups, and half the real estate in Tribeca. He was dangerous, not because he screamed, but because he never had to. And then there was Vanessa. Elara felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. Vanessa Ricci, the daughter of the Chicago outfit's head, was Dante's fiancée. It was a political match, a merger of empires, but Vanessa treated New York City like her personal playground. She was beautiful in a sharp, synthetic way, all veneers, fillers, and platinum extensions. But her personality was pure acid. "Elara," Gilles snapped, snapping his fingers in front of her face. "You're on table 1. Do not screw this up." Vanessa sent back the risotto 3 times last week because she said the saffron tasted poor. Just pour the wine and disappear. "Understood," Elara said softly. She grabbed the decanter of the 1996 Dom Perignon Rose Gold. Her hands were steady. They had to be. Walking out onto the floor, Elara moved with the grace of a dancer. She approached table 1, located in the secluded alcove overlooking the city skyline. Dante Moretti sat with his back to the wall, a habit of men who survived assassination attempts. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Elara's entire education. He was devastatingly handsome, with dark, intelligent eyes that scanned the room constantly. But he looked bored. Vanessa sat opposite him, scrolling through her phone, the light from the screen illuminating her bored expression. She was wearing a red Versace gown that was cut low enough to be a scandal and high enough to be a threat. "The wine, sir, madam." Elara said, her voice a low murmur. Dante didn't look up. He just tapped the table with a manicured finger. Elara moved to pour. She performed the ritual perfectly label, facing the guest a slight twist of the wrist to prevent the drop. The golden-pink liquid filled Vanessa's glass. Vanessa finally looked up from her phone. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't look at the wine. She looked at Elara. Specifically, she looked at the faint, fading scar on Elara's wrist, visible just below her cuff. "Wait," Vanessa said, her voice shrill enough to cut through the low hum of jazz. Elara froze. "Is everything all right, Miss Ricci?" "I asked for the 96. Vanessa sneered, picking up the glass and inspecting it against the light, like she was searching for a diamond flaw. "This smells like vinegar. Did you bring me the house swill?" "I assure you, madame, this is the Dom Perignon Rose Gold." 6. Elara replied, keeping her tone neutral. "I opened the bottle myself at the bar." "Are you arguing with me?" Vanessa asked, her voice rising. She enjoyed this. It was blood sport for her. She looked at Dante, expecting him to back her up. Dante took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes finally flickering toward the waitress. He said nothing. He was watching. "I am simply clarifying, madame," Elara said, lowering her head. "I can bring the bottle to show you the cork." "I don't want to see the cork," Vanessa snapped. "I want a server who knows her place. You people are all the same. Uneducated, lazy, and incompetent." Vanessa's hand shot out. It wasn't an accident. She backhanded the glass Elara was holding. The crystal shattered. The vintage champagne, thousands of dollars worth of it, splashed across the table onto the floor and soaked the front of Elara's white shirt. The restaurant went silent. "Look what you did," Vanessa shrieked, standing up and pointing a perfectly manicured finger at the stain on her own dress, which had caught a single drop. "You clumsy little idiot. You ruined my Versace." Elara stood there, the sticky, cold liquid soaking into her skin. She felt the humiliation burn her cheeks. Every eye in the restaurant was on her. Gilles was running over, looking like he was about to have a heart attack. "Get on your knees," Vanessa hissed, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Clean it up, and then apologize to my shoes." Dante shifted in his seat. He looked at Vanessa, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face, but he didn't stop her. In their world, you didn't undermine your partner in public, even if she was being a monster. Elara looked at the broken glass. She looked at the floor. "I said..." Vanessa stepped closer, towering over Elara in her 6-inch Louboutins. "Get on your knees, you trash." Elara took a breath. She closed her eyes for a split second. When she opened them, the submissive, invisible waitress was gone. Something else had taken her place. Something cold. Something dangerous. Elara didn't kneel. Instead, she reached into her apron, pulled out a linen cloth, and calmly wiped the champagne from her own wrist. "No," Elara said. The word hung in the air like a suspended guillotine. Gilles, the manager, skidded to a halt at the table. "Miss Ricci, Mr. Moretti, I am so sorry. I will fire her immediately. "Quiet," Dante said. His voice wasn't loud. But it silenced Gilles instantly. Dante was looking at Elara with a strange intensity. He had never seen a civilian say no to a made man's fiancée. Vanessa laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "No. Did you just say no to me?" "Do you know who I am?" "My father owns this city block. I could have you killed and buried before dessert." "Your father is Salvatore Ricci," Elara said, her voice steady and surprisingly posh, dropping the working-class Queen's accent she usually feigned. "He runs the unions in Chicago. He doesn't own this block. The Moretti family holds the deed through a shell corporation called Janus Holdings. And you aren't drinking the 96 because you enjoy it, Vanessa. You're drinking it because it's the most expensive thing on the menu. Vanessa's mouth fell open. Elara wasn't finished. She stepped forward, ignoring the champagne dripping from her shirt. Furthermore, Elara continued, her eyes locking onto Vanessa's. You claimed the saffron in the risotto was poor last week. That wasn't poor quality. It was Grecian saffron, rather than the Spanish variety you're used to. It has a earthier, more hay-like profile. A palate refined by actual culture, rather than just money, would have recognized the distinction. The silence in the room was deafening. Guests at nearby tables. Senators, CEOs, hedge fund managers had stopped eating to watch. Vanessa turned a deep shade of crimson. You little, she sputtered, grasping for an insult. She switched to Italian, a language she used to assert dominance over the staff. Tu sei solo una puttana povera, non vali niente. You are just a poor whore. You are worth nothing. Dante's eyebrows shot up. He knew Vanessa's Italian was mediocre, at best learned from tutors, not the streets. Elara smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. She replied in Italian, but not just Italian. She spoke in the specific archaic dialect of the Sicilian aristocracy, the Gattopardo dialect, flawless, rapid, and dripping with venom. La povertà non è nell'assenza di denaro, signorina Ricci, ma nell'assenza di dignità, Elara said smoothly. E la tua pronuncia è atroce. Si dice niente, non nende. Sembri una turista americana che cerca di comprare borse false a Firenze. Poverty is not the absence of money, Miss Ricci, but the absence of dignity. And your pronunciation is atrocious. You sound like an American tourist trying to buy fake handbags in Florence. Vanessa froze. She didn't understand half the words, but she understood the tone. She understood that she had just been undressed intellectually in front of the entire elite of New York. Elara turned to Dante. For the first time, she looked the wolf in the eye. The bottle of Dom Perignon is on me, Elara said, pulling a wad of cash from her apron, her entire month's rent, and dropping it onto the wet tablecloth. It wasn't enough to cover the bottle, but the gesture was symbolic. I quit. She turned on her heel and walked away. She didn't run. She walked. The sound of her sensible work shoes on the marble floor was the only sound in the room. Back at the table, Vanessa was hyperventilating. Dante, did you hear that? Kill her. I want her dead. Send the boys. Dante. Moretti didn't move. He stared at the retreating figure of the waitress. He ignored his fiancée's screaming. He reached out, dipped a finger into the spilled champagne, and rubbed it against his thumb. Gilles, Dante said, not looking away from the kitchen door, where Elara had vanished. Yes, Mr. Moretti. Who is she? Just a girl, sir. Hired 2 months ago. Clean background check. Nobody special. Dante smirked. A genuine, terrifying smirk. That girl speaks High Sicilian better than my own grandmother, and she just insulted the Ricci family with more class than this entire room combined. Dante stood up, buttoning his jacket. The air around him crackled with energy. Dante, where are you going? Vanessa shrieked, grabbing his arm. He pulled his arm away coldly and firmly. Go home, Vanessa. Take the car. But what about her? Leave her to me, Dante said darkly. I don't like unsolved mysteries. Elara burst out of the back exit of the obsidian into the cool night air of the alleyway. Her hands were finally shaking. The adrenaline was crashing. Stupid, 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 she cursed herself. You promised you'd stay hidden. You promised you wouldn't let the mask slip. She leaned against the brick wall, gasping for air. She had exposed herself. If Dante Moretti dug deep enough, if he peeled back the layers of Elara Vance, he wouldn't find a waitress. He would find the daughter of the man the Mafia feared most, the man who stole $10 million from the commission and vanished. She had to run. Tonight. She pushed off the wall and started walking fast toward the subway station. She needed to get to Queens, grab her mother, and leave the state. A black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly alongside her. The window hummed down. "Get in, Elara," a deep voice said. She froze. It wasn't Dante. It was his head of security, a massive man named Luca. "I'm walking," she said, clutching her purse. "Mr. Moretti insists," Luca said, the click of the door unlocking, echoing in the empty street. "And he said to tell you. He liked your accent." Elara looked down the street. It was empty. She knew how this worked. If she ran, they would chase her. If she fought, they would hurt her. She opened the door and climbed in. Sitting in the back seat, illuminated by the city lights passing by, was Dante Moretti. He held a glass of whiskey in one hand and a dossier in the other. "So," Dante said, not looking up from the file, "Elara Vance, or should I say, Elara Rossi." Elara's blood ran cold. He knew. "Drive," Dante told the driver. The lock clicked shut. The interior of the armored Cadillac Escalade smelled of cedarwood and cold air conditioning. It was a silent, moving fortress, cutting through the chaotic heart of Manhattan. Elara sat pressed against the leather door, her eyes fixed on Dante. He hadn't looked at her since the car started moving. He was calmly flipping through the manila folder, the streetlights casting rhythmic shadows across his sharp jawline. "Rossi," Dante murmured, testing the name like a wine cork. "Giovanni Rossi, the commission's favorite accountant, the man who could hide $1 billion in a lemonade stand." He finally looked up, closing the folder with a soft thud. "And the man who vanished 5 years ago, with the master ledger of the 5 families." Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face remained a mask of stone. "I don't know who that is." "Don't insult me, Elara," Dante said, his voice dropping an octave. It was a terrifying sound, smooth calm, and utterly lethal. "You have his eyes, you have his intellect, and apparently you have his education. Only a Rossi would teach his daughter the Gattopardo dialect. It's a dead language spoken only by the ghosts of the Sicilian aristocracy and the men who think they still rule the world." Elara swallowed hard. "If you think I know where he is, you're wasting your gas. I haven't seen my father in 5 years. He left us. He left us with nothing." "I know," Dante said. He reached into the seat pocket and pulled out a tablet. He tapped the screen and slid it across the leather seat toward her. Elara looked down. It was a live feed, a hospital room. The breath hitched in her throat. It was a private room at Mount Sinai, but not the cramped shared ward her mother was currently in. This room was luxurious. There were fresh flowers. A private nurse was adjusting the pillows, and in the bed, looking frail but peaceful, was her mother, Eleanor. "What did you do?" Elara hissed, lunging forward. "If you hurt her—" "I moved her," Dante interrupted, not flinching at her sudden aggression. "She was in a ward with 3 other people receiving standard state-funded care for stage 4 lymphoma. Now, she is in the VIP wing. Dr. Aris Thorne, the best oncologist on the East Coast, has taken over her case as of 20 minutes ago." Elara stared at the screen. tears pricking her eyes. She felt sick. Why you don't do charity? No, I do business. Dante took a sip of his whiskey. Your father stole something from my family. Not money. He stole information, codes, access to accounts in the Cayman Islands that I need to legitimize my empire. The old guard, the dinosaurs who run the Sicilian clans, they won't talk to me. They think I'm too American, too corporate. He leaned in closer. The scent of his cologne, sandalwood, and tobacco filled her senses. They respect lineage. They respect the old tongue. They respect class. Dante whispered. You proved tonight you have all three. You shamed Vanessa, a woman born into this life, without raising your voice. You wielded words like a knife. So, Elara challenged. So I have a summit in 3 days. The Sicilian delegation is coming to New York. If I don't secure their blessing, and the access codes your father hid my enemies in Chicago, Vanessa's father included, will move against me. They will tear my empire apart. The car began to slow down. They were pulling into the private underground garage of the Moretti Tower, a 90-story glass needle piercing the Tribeca skyline. I need a translator, Dante said, locking eyes with her. But more than that, I need a partner. Someone who can walk into a room of wolves and make them sit. Vanessa can't do it. She's a child playing dress-up. You are the real thing. And if I refuse, Dante gestured to the tablet, then Dr. Thorne is taken off the case. Your mother goes back to the ward, and I hand you over to Vanessa's father, who is very eager to know where Giovanni Rossi's daughter is hiding. The car stopped. The doors unlocked. Elara looked at the tablet at her mother's sleeping face. She looked at Dante, the devil in a 3-piece suit. I hate you, she whispered. Dante smirked a cold, humorless expression. Good. Hate is useful. Love makes you sloppy. The penthouse was a testament to lonely power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of the city that Dante Moretti owned. But the space felt cold marble floors, modern art that looked like violent slashes of paint, and furniture that looked too expensive to sit on. Dante tossed his jacket onto a sofa and loosened his tie. Luca will show you to the guest suite. You'll find clothes there. Burn that waitress uniform. It offends me. I'm not your doll, Dante, Elara said, standing in the middle of the vast living room, hugging her arms. I'm not going to wear fancy dresses and pretend to be your girlfriend, just so you can close a deal. Dante stopped pouring himself a drink. He turned slowly. You think this is about pretending to be my girlfriend, no, Elara. I need you to be my consigliere. He walked over to a massive oak desk and picked up a document. The Sicilians are led by Don Salvatore. He's 80 years old. He believes women should be silent, but he also believes in blood. Your father Giovanni was his godson before he turned traitor. If you walk in there as my translator, speaking his dialect, showing him the respect he craves while subtly guiding the negotiation, he will sign. And Vanessa, Elara asked, does your fiancée know you're replacing her with the waitress she just tried to humiliate? At the mention of Vanessa, Dante's jaw tightened. Vanessa is a liability. Her father, Santino Ricci, forced this engagement to bind our families. If I break it, it's war. But if she breaks it, or if she is proven unfit, he trailed off. You want me to bait her? Elara realized, her eyes widening. You want me to make her so crazy with jealousy that she does something stupid in front of the Sicilians? You want to use me as a human shield? I want to use you as a weapon, Dante corrected. There is a difference. Suddenly, The elevator doors at the far end of the room chimed. Dante cursed under his breath. Speak of the devil. The doors slid open, and Vanessa Ricci stormed in. She was still wearing the red Versace dress, now stained with wine, her makeup smeared from crying or screaming. She was followed by two of her father's bodyguards, looking uncomfortable. You brought her here, Vanessa shrieked, her voice echoing off the glass walls. She pointed a shaking finger at Elara. I checked the tracker on your car. Dante, you brought the help to your penthouse. Elara stood her ground. She didn't look at the floor this time. Dante stepped between them. Go home, Vanessa. You're drunk. I am not drunk. I am humiliated. Vanessa marched forward, grabbing a heavy crystal ashtray from the coffee table. Get her out of here, or I swear to God I will smash her face in myself. Put it down. Dante warned, his voice low. No. You are my fiancée. You belong to the Ricci family, Vanessa screamed. She wound up to throw the heavy crystal at Elara. Elara didn't flinch. She calculated the distance. She calculated the weight. Vanessa, Elara said, her voice cutting through the hysteria. That is a baccarat crystal piece from the 1920s. It's worth more than your car. If you throw it, you won't hit me. I'm faster than you. You'll hit the window behind me. That is reinforced, tempered glass. The ashtray will bounce back and likely hit you in the face. Is that the headline you want tomorrow? Mafia princess knocks herself out in fit of rage. Vanessa froze the ashtray held high. She looked at the window. She looked at Elara. Who are you? Vanessa whispered, fear creeping into her eyes. I'm the person saving you from yourself, Elara said coolly. Dante watched the exchange, a flicker of genuine admiration crossing his face. He walked over to Vanessa and gently took the heavy crystal from her hand. Luca, Dante barked. The giant security guard materialized from the shadows. Escort Miss Ricci home. If she resists, call her father and tell him she's having an episode. You can't do this, Vanessa wailed as Luca firmly guided her toward the elevator. My father will hear about this. You're choosing a waitress over me, over the alliance. I'm choosing competence, Dante said coldly. The elevator doors closed, silencing her screams. The room fell silent again. Dante turned to Elara. The atmosphere had shifted. The air was charged with adrenaline. You handled that well, he said. I grew up watching my father negotiate with murderers in our living room. Elara said, her voice trembling slightly now that the danger had passed. I know how to de-escalate toddlers with guns. Dante walked toward her. He stopped just a foot away. The heat radiating from him was intense. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch was electric, startling Elara. The summit is in 2 days, Dante said softly. Tomorrow we train. You need to know everything about the business. You need to know the players. And you need to look the part. And my mother? Elara asked, holding his gaze. She is sleeping comfortably. Dr. Thorne just sent an update. Her vitals are stable. Elara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Fine. I'll do it. I'll be your translator. I'll be your weapon. But when this is over, Dante, when you get your codes and your contract, I take my mother and we disappear, and you never look for us again. Dante looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. He traced the line of her jaw with his thumb. Agreed. He lied. He knew even then that he would never let her go. The next morning, the sun didn't just rise, it assaulted the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. Elara woke up in a bed that cost more than her mother's medical treatments for the last 3 years combined. The sheets were Egyptian cotton, with a thread count so high it felt like sleeping on liquid. For a moment she forgot. She forgot the broken glass, the car ride, the deal with the devil. Then she saw the garment rack standing in the center of the room. It wasn't filled with frilly dresses. It was filled with armor. Dante was waiting for her in the library, a room that smelled of old money and lemon polish. He was on the phone speaking rapid-fire Italian, his hand chopping the air. When he saw her, he hung up without saying goodbye. "Coffee," he said, sliding a porcelain cup across the desk. "Black. You'll need the caffeine. We have 12 hours to turn you from a waitress into a consigliere." Elara took the coffee. She was wearing a silk robe she found in the bathroom. She felt exposed, yet oddly powerful. "I don't need 12 hours to learn how to talk to old men, Dante. I need 12 hours to understand your books, so I don't accidentally agree to a federal crime." Dante smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his face. "Good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear." He stood up and walked around the desk. But first, the aesthetic. The Sicilians, especially Don Salvatore, are visual creatures. They respect strength. Vanessa wears Versace because it screams money. You need to wear something that screams power. He gestured to a team of 3 people who had been waiting silently in the corner, a stylist, a tailor, and a makeup artist. "No pink," Dante commanded the stylist. "No frills, no cleavage. I want her to look like she owns the bank, not like she's trying to rob it. Put her in Alexander McQueen. Sharp shoulders, dark tones, structured." The next 2 hours were a blur of fabric and pins. Elara didn't complain. She understood the game. In her old life, her uniform was a shield of invisibility. Here the clothes were a weapon of intimidation. When she finally looked in the mirror, she gasped. She was wearing a midnight blue tailored suit with a high collar and a structured blazer that accentuated her waist while looking aggressively professional. Her hair was slicked back into a severe chic chignon. Her lips were painted a deep matte berry color. The waitress was dead. The Mafia queen had arrived. Dante walked in, buttoning his cuffs. He stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes traveled from her heels to her eyes. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a magnetic tension that terrified Elara more than any gun. "Perfect," he murmured, his voice rough. "Now sit. Let's look at the ledgers." For the rest of the day, they sat side by side at the mahogany desk. The proximity was intoxicating. Elara could smell the crisp scent of his shirt and the faint hint of expensive scotch, but she forced herself to focus on the numbers. "Here," Elara said, pointing a manicured fingernail at a column in the shipping manifest. "You're routing the grey market electronics through the port of Newark." "That's a mistake." Dante frowned. "Why?" "It's the fastest route." "It's the fastest route, but the union rep there is new. A guy named Kowalski. My father mentioned him in his journals years ago as an up-and-comer who couldn't be bought." Elara improvised, drawing on her memory of her father's paranoid ramblings. "If you push this much cargo through a clean rep, he'll flag it. Route it through Philadelphia. It adds 6 hours, but the inspector there owes the Ricci family a favor. It's safer." Dante stared at her. He looked at the map, then back at her. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "You just saved me $5 million in seized assets," he said quietly. "I told you," Elara said, not looking up from the papers. "I'm not just a pretty face." "No," Dante said, reaching out to cover her hand with his. His palm was warm, calloused, and large. "You're terrifying. And I think," he hesitated, his thumb grazing her knuckles, I think you might be the only person in this city who actually sees me. Elara's breath hitched. She looked up. Their faces were inches apart. The business discussion had vanished. There was only the heat, the shared secret, the undeniable pull of two lonely souls finding a match in the dark. Dante leaned in. Elara didn't pull away. She wanted this. God help her, she wanted the monster to kiss her. Buzz. The intercom on the desk blared, shattering the moment like the wine glass the night before. Sir. Luca's voice crackled. The car is ready. Don Salvatore has landed at Teterboro. The summit is in 1 hour. Dante pulled back, his eyes dark and frustrated. He cleared his throat, the mask of the Don slamming back into place. Let's go, he said, standing up abruptly. Showtime. Elara stood her legs, trembling slightly. She grabbed her clutch. She felt a cold knot of dread in her stomach. The training was over. Now she had to walk into the lion's den. The venue for the summit was the private wine cellar of Del Posto. It was underground, dimly lit, and smelled of centuries-old cork and damp stone. The walls were lined with bottles worth more than most houses. In the center of the room sat a long, heavy oak table. Seated at the head was Don Salvatore. He was a relic, 80 years old, with skin like crumpled parchment and eyes that looked like black olives, hard, shiny, and devoid of soul. He was flanked by 4 Sicilian bodyguards who looked like they were carved out of granite. Dante walked in first, radiating confidence. Elara walked a step behind him, and to the left, the traditional position of a trusted advisor, not a girlfriend. Don Salvatore, Dante said, bowing his head slightly. Welcome to New York. The old man didn't smile. He looked at Dante, then his gaze slid to Elara. He sneered. Who is this? Salvatore rasped in Italian. I came to speak with a man, not to look at your whore. Dante stiffened. His hand twitched toward his jacket. Elara stepped forward before Dante could ruin everything. She looked the old Don dead in the eye. Perdonatemi, Don Salvatore, Elara said. Her voice was low, melodic, and perfectly accented in the rare Gattopardo dialect, the language of the Sicilian nobility, the language of the Don's childhood. Non sono una donna di piacere. Sono la voce della ragione. E porto I saluti della terra che ci ha creato entrambi. Forgive me, Don Salvatore. I am not a woman of pleasure. I am the voice of reason, and I bring greetings from the land that created us both. The silence that followed was absolute. Don Salvatore's eyes widened. He sat up straighter. Gattopardo. Who speaks this tongue in this godless city? Someone who remembers history, Elara replied, taking the seat next to Dante without being asked. Dante Moretti respects the old ways. That is why he brought me. Because he knows that business is not just about money. It is about understanding. The tension in the room broke. Salvatore actually smiled, a gruesome, toothy expression. Sit. Pour the wine. Let us talk. For the next 2 hours, Elara was magnificent. She translated not just the words, but the subtext. When Dante was too aggressive about percentage points, Elara softened the phrasing in Italian, framing it as a gesture of respect rather than a demand. When Salvatore was being stubborn about territory, Elara invoked old Sicilian proverbs that obliged him to be generous. She was weaving a web, and the old spider was falling right into it. By the time the espresso was served, the contract was on the table. Salvatore had a pen in his hand. You have done well, Dante, Salvatore said in broken English, tapping the paper. You have a smart woman, a woman of blood. I will sign. Dante looked at Elara. His eyes were shining with triumph and something else pride. Intense burning pride. Thank you, Don Salvatore, Dante said. The pen touched the paper. Bang! The heavy oak doors of the wine cellar flew open, slamming against the stone walls. Vanessa Ricci stood there. But she wasn't the hysterical mess from the night before. She was calm, cold, and she wasn't alone. Standing behind her was her father, Santino Ricci, Dante's rival, and a dozen armed men. Stop! Vanessa commanded, her voice echoing in the vaulted ceiling. Don Salvatore dropped the pen. The bodyguards in the room drew their weapons. Suddenly, 20 guns were pointed in every direction. It was a Mexican standoff. What is the meaning of this, Santino? Don Salvatore barked, standing up. I am conducting business. You are being conned, Don Salvatore, Vanessa said, stepping into the light. She was wearing white, looking like a vengeful angel. She held up a manila folder. Dante isn't showing you respect. He's spitting in your face. Get her out of here, Dante snarled, stepping in front of Elara. Listen to me, Vanessa shouted, looking directly at the old Don. You know who she is. You think she's just a translator. She's the daughter of the rat who stole $10 million from you 5 years ago. The room went deathly still. Elara felt the blood drain from her face. Vanessa threw the folder onto the table. It slid across the wood and stopped in front of Don Salvatore. Photos spilled out. Photos of a younger Elara standing next to a man. Giovanni Rossi. Her name is Elara Rossi, Vanessa hissed, pointing a finger that felt like a dagger. The daughter of Giovanni the Rat. Dante is hiding her. He's sleeping with the enemy. And he brought the traitor's blood to your table to mock you. Don Salvatore looked at the photos. He looked at Elara. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a black, bottomless void of hate. Is this true? Salvatore whispered. The sound was more terrifying than a scream. Dante didn't move. He kept his body between Elara and the guns. Salvatore, listen to me. She is not her father. Is it true? Salvatore roared, slamming his fist on the table. Elara stepped out from behind Dante. She knew lying now would mean immediate death. Yes, she said, her voice trembling but clear. I am Giovanni's daughter. Kill them, Salvatore said. He didn't even shout it. He just said it like he was ordering dinner. Kill them all. No, Dante shouted. He kicked the heavy oak table over, creating a barricade just as the gunfire erupted. Crack, 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 bullets chipped the stone walls and shattered the priceless wine bottles. Red wine sprayed like blood mixing with the chaos. Dante grabbed Elara by the waist and threw her behind the overturned table. Glass was raining down on them. The noise was deafening. You have a plan, right? Elara screamed over the noise of automatic fire. Dante, tell me you have a plan. Dante reloaded his handgun, his face grim. He looked at her, and for the first time, he looked unsure. My plan was for you to charm him, not for Vanessa to ambush us with your birth certificate, Dante yelled back. He popped up, fired 2 shots, and ducked back down as wood splinters exploded near his head. We're trapped. The only exit is behind them. Elara looked around. They were pinned. Santino's men were advancing. Don Salvatore's men were flanking. They had seconds before they were overrun. She looked at Dante. He was ready to die fighting. He was ready to die for her. But Elara wasn't ready to die. And she remembered something. Something her father had told her about Don Salvatore. A secret so old, so dangerous that Giovanni had never written it down. He had only whispered it to her once when he was drunk and weeping. Dante. Elara grabbed his arm. Stop shooting. Are you insane? I can stop this. Elara said, her eyes wild. I have the ace. What ace? My father didn't just steal money. Elara said, her voice steady amidst the chaos. He stole the proof of what happened to Salvatore's son in 1995. Dante froze. Everyone knew the story. Salvatore's son had been kidnapped and killed by rivals. It was the tragedy that turned Salvatore into a monster. You know who killed him? Dante asked. Elara looked toward the firing line, where Santino Ricci stood next to his daughter Vanessa, looking smug. Yes, Elara whispered. Santino Ricci killed him. Dante looked at her. He understood immediately. Cover me, Elara said. Elara, no. But she didn't listen. She stood up. In the middle of the gunfight, amidst the flying glass and screaming men, Elara Vance stood up from behind the table with her hands raised high. Stop! She screamed in the Gattopardo dialect, her voice piercing the noise. Don Salvatore, ask Santino where he buried your son. The echo of Elara's scream bounced off the wine bottles louder than the gunfire that had preceded it. Stop! Don Salvatore bellowed. His voice was a guttural roar that commanded absolute obedience. His bodyguards lowered their submachine guns instantly. On the other side of the room, Santino Ricci's men hesitated, their eyes darting between their boss and the legendary Sicilian Don. The silence that descended on the cellar was heavy, suffocating, and smelled of cordite and spilled Merlot. Don Salvatore stepped over the shattered remains of a Jeroboam of Chianti. He walked slowly toward the overturned table where Dante and Elara were crouching. He didn't look at Dante. His black eyes were fixed solely on Elara. What did you say? Salvatore whispered. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so ancient it felt biblical. Elara stood up slowly. Her ears were ringing from the gunshots. She brushed the glass shards from her blazer. She looked past Salvatore, locking eyes with Santino Ricci. Santino, a man who usually wore a mask of arrogant indifference, looked pale. Sweat beaded on his upper lip. Beside him, Vanessa looked confused, her earlier confidence replaced by the dawning realization that they had lost control of the room. He lied to you, Don Salvatore, Elara said, her voice gaining strength. For 30 years, Santino told you it was the Colombians who took your son Marco. He helped you wage a war against them. He helped you burn their operations to the ground. And in the chaos, the Ricci family quietly took over their territory. Lies, Santino shouted, stepping forward, his gun raised. She's a rat's daughter. She's lying to save her skin. Kill her. Lower your weapon. Santino, Salvatore said, not turning around. The menace in his voice was absolute. I have the proof, Elara said quickly, knowing she had seconds before Santino started shooting again. My father Giovanni managed the payments. He kept a separate ledger, the Black Ledger. He wrote down every bribe, every hitman, every cover-up. And where is this ledger? Vanessa sneered, trying to regain ground. Does it exist, or is it in your imagination? It's in my head, Elara said, tapping her temple. My father made me memorize the key entries before he left. He knew one day I might need to trade them for my life. She took a step toward Don Salvatore. The bodyguards tensed, but Salvatore held up a hand. Prove it, the old man rasped. Tell me something only the killer would know. Elara took a deep breath. This was it. The memory was vivid, her father's drunken, weeping voice recounting the sins he had helped finance. "When Marco was taken," Elara said softly, the room leaning in to hear her. He was wearing a communion cross, but he was also hiding something in his pocket. A toy. A small tin soldier painted blue. He had stolen it from his cousin earlier that day. Don Salvatore froze. A gasp escaped his throat, a sound of pure, raw pain. Santino's men didn't know it was there. Elara continued, her eyes never leaving Santino's face. When they buried him with it, in the foundation of the West Side Highway construction project. Pile number 412. My father paid the cement crew to look the other way. Tears streamed down Don Salvatore's leathery face. It was a sight that terrified everyone in the room. The devil was crying. "The blue soldier," Salvatore whispered. He showed it to me that morning. He said it was his protector." Slowly, terrifyingly, Don Salvatore turned to face Santino Ricci. Santino was backing away. "Salvatore, listen. The girl is crazy. It was business. It was a long time ago." "Business," Salvatore repeated. He walked toward Santino. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked with the slow, inevitable momentum of a glacier. "You ate at my table. You held my wife's hand at the funeral. You swore vengeance with me." "It was necessary," Santino screamed, raising his gun. "You were weak. The family needed new blood." Santino pulled to the trigger. Click. Santino looked at his gun in horror. It had jammed, or perhaps in his panic he had miscounted his rounds. Don Salvatore didn't need a gun. He gestured to his 4 bodyguards. "Prendeteli," he said softly. "Take them." The room erupted into violence, but this time it was one-sided. The Sicilian guards moved with brutal efficiency. Within seconds, Santino's men were disarmed and on their knees. Santino was pinned to the floor, his face pressed into the wine-soaked concrete. And then there was Vanessa. The Mafia princess was cowering in the corner, clutching her designer purse, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. "Dante!" she screamed, looking for a savior. "Dante, please help me. I'm your fiancé." Dante Moretti stepped out from behind the table. He dusted off his suit jacket. He walked over to where Vanessa was shivering. He looked down at her with zero sympathy. "You're not my fiancée, Vanessa," Dante said coldly. "You're the daughter of a traitor, and you tried to have the woman I love killed." The realization hit Elara like a physical blow. The woman I love. He had said it. In front of everyone. Don Salvatore stood over Santino. He looked at Dante. "The contract is signed," Salvatore said, his voice void of emotion. "New York is yours, Moretti. The Ricci territory is yours. Their assets are yours." He pointed a shaking finger at Santino and Vanessa. "But they are mine. I have a construction site to visit. I want to find my son." Dante nodded once. "Do what you must, Don Salvatore." 2 guards dragged a screaming Santino toward the exit. Another guard grabbed Vanessa by the arm. "No. No, I didn't know," Vanessa shrieked as she was hauled away, her heels scraping uselessly against the floor. "Look at me. I'm Vanessa Ricci. You can't do this to me." Elara watched her go. She felt no triumph. She felt no joy. She just felt the heavy, crushing weight of justice. Vanessa, who had treated people like garbage her entire life, who had thought her last name made her untouchable, was now nothing. She was being erased. as the heavy doors slammed shut, sealing the fate of the Ricci family. Silence returned to the cellar. Dante turned to Elara. He was bleeding from a cut on his cheek. His suit was ruined. But he had never looked more handsome. He walked over to her and took her face in his hands. "You saved us," he whispered. "I just told the truth," Elara said, her voice shaking as the adrenaline crashed. "I just wanted it to be over." "It is over," Dante said. He kissed her forehead. "Your mother is safe. You are safe. No one will ever threaten you again." Elara looked up at him. "And the deal, I did my job. I'm free to go." Dante smiled a sad, knowing smile. "Elara, look around you. You just took down the Ricci family with a story. You commanded the respect of Don Salvatore. You aren't a waitress anymore. You aren't even a consigliere." He kissed her, and this time it wasn't a performance. It was a promise. "You're the queen," he murmured against her lips, "and I don't think I can rule without you." The reopening of the Obsidian was the event of the season. The press was there. The politicians were there. Everyone wanted to see the new power couple of New York. Dante Moretti stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking impeccable in a tuxedo. But all eyes were on the woman descending the stairs beside him. Elara wore a gown of shimmering silver, her head held high. She didn't look like a ghost anymore. She didn't look invisible. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, the floor manager, a new man, as Gilles had been let go, rushed over with a bottle of champagne. The 1996 Dom Perignon Rose Gold for the lady, he asked nervously. Elara looked at the bottle. She looked at the glass. She smiled. "No," she said softly. "I'll have the sparkling water. I have a long night of business ahead of me." She took Dante's arm. He squeezed her hand. In the corner of the room, hidden by the shadows, sat an old man in a wheelchair. It was Elara's father, Giovanni. He was frail but clean-shaven and dressed in a fine suit. He raised a glass to his daughter. She had done what he never could. She had stopped running. Elara Vance, the quiet waitress from Queens, looked out over the sea of faces, the people who used to look through her like she was glass. Now they bowed. She had challenged the darkness, and she had won. And that is how the quietest person in the room became the most dangerous. It's a brutal reminder that true power isn't about how loud you scream or how expensive your clothes are. It's about what you know and the dignity you carry. Vanessa Ricci thought she could crush Elara because she was just a waitress, but she forgot the golden rule of life. Be careful who you step on, because they might be the only one who knows where the bodies are buried. What would you have done if you were Elara? Would you have saved Dante? Or would you have taken your mother and run? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, romance, and instant karma, please destroy that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already hit, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. We have a massive thriller coming next week that you do not want to miss. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.